He and they don't always. Sometimes it takes more than 3 to get the work done every month. But we miss you, brother. But praise the Lord for what you're doing down there. Carl is the new pastor of the church there in Plantation, Florida, and seeing that ministry go ahead. Brother Randy Scarf is used. You don't know Randy? He's the guy that plays Elvis every year. He's not here this year. His business and things required him not to be here. But Carl is going to go home. I told him, so kick him one good time for me. And his brother said, kick him one. So I think he's got 8 or 10 kicks to give him when he gets down there. But we praise the Lord for Carl's ministry there and for him being there. Well, I gave you got the handouts that we were they were giving out a minute ago. We only have 45 minutes, and I feel like, that I'm doing a very poor job of trying to communicate some of this information to you. I don't want you to get caught up in the details so much. If you want the details, well, my books are gone now, so I don't know where they are, but they'll come back, I know. But get the book, read the book, The Fourth Turning. If you haven't read that, you need to sit down and read it and absorb the information in it, just to understand American history. And the book by Harry Dent, if you have any interest if you want to understand political history, socio-economic history, political-geographic history, you need to read that book. Because it does what, in the first session, the thing about the cycles and the seasons, that book understands that principle and applies it to history. I'm not telling you everything in it's perfect. I'm telling you it's something that you need to have in your mind. If you're the economic side of things, anything by Harry Dent is worth reading, and that particular book is his latest, and that's the most up to date. And the other book about the 100 years, that's just fun to read. Now, that's not going to get you. You're not going to live 100 years, so you don't, and all things. But when he talks about the coming war with Turkey and Poland being the 2 great potential world conflicts in the next 30 years, you say, huh? And I say, remember that 20 years ago, you wouldn't have thought it was what it is now, so don't be so smart. But when he says Turkey, then you begin to think, wow, what we understand about the Antichrist and the Middle East is where not Europe, but the Middle East is where the 10 kings will be, and Asia Minor is modern-day Turkey, and that's where all those 7 churches in the book of the Revelation are, and they come down, and I say, wow, isn't that interesting? And anyway, that's for you to enjoy that. This sheet that I gave you, I wanted you to have a list on one side like this. It says the turnings grouped by turnings. There is, you see spring, summer, winter, and fall and winter in the left-hand column, and then it tells you the way you read that is if you start at the top, 1487 to 1517, then if you go to the next, don't go to the next one, but go down to the second turning, you see the 1517 to 1542, then you go down to the third one, and you'll see. So what you'll see is the dating for each one of the turnings. Now, if you look at the bottom of the first turning, you'll see 1946 to 64. That was spring, and the cycle that we're in. Then, and the second turning, summer, 1964 to 1984. That's the summer. 1984 to 01 is the fall, and 01 to 24 is the winter. So that's where the dating comes from. What these men have, and this is, it got a little adjustments in it, but basically this comes right out of that book, The Fourth Turning, or off their website. And that gives you an idea of how these things work out in history. And I got this for you so that you can look. If you look at that bottom one, the Fourth Turning winter, it has listed for you all the winters in American history. Now, if you go up to where it says 1773 to 1794, the American Revolution, that is the first one of the cycles that is purely American history. All of that cycle is the first cycle that took place all on American soil. The previous ones took place partly in Europe, with the colonialization and the settling of the New World. So it's those 4 that are the purely American cycles. So if that's of interest to you. But you see how our going into winter matches 1929 to 1946 and 1860 to 1865. You notice 1860 to 65, the Civil War is only 5 years, it's not 20 years. And that's an illustration of how a winter can go bad. Because what happened in the run-up to and the execution and then the climax of the Civil War was that it destroyed the ability of the culture to produce the next generation. And actually it skipped a generation. And that's an illustration of how these things are not just automatic if things go terribly wrong. But that's the only time in American history that that's taken place. Every other time it's come out. And the reason they come out that way, frankly, has to do with what goes on in these turnings. And I said to you a moment ago, the most exciting and dramatic season of your life and of your ministry is upon you. Because we're going into the cycle now of wintertime. And wintertime is the most dramatic of all of the seasons. And so without your, and every person, if you live a normal life, will go through one winter season. You'll go through it at a different age. But you'll go through it. So no matter what age you are, the most exciting, dramatic period, 20 years of your life, is in front of you. Okay? If you're my age, it's coming, and you'll be an elder. Some of you, if you're 20, it's coming in your young adulthood. You're going to come of age watching this 20 years. Your cohorts are going to make decisions and acquire values and test values and make them their own during this period of time. If you're in your young adult life, in midlife, you're going to have to manage what goes on. And you understand, I'm 61. The oldest baby boomer is 63. We will not be out of control for another maybe 8 years, 10 at the most. So there's a transition through. This is not a boom, boom, but there comes a point at which things tip. In the cycle there that says the Great Depression, World War II, 1929, 1946, the climax to that came in 1941, December 7th, 1941, when the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor. Churchill said, "America will enter the war." We didn't enter it in the Pacific, we entered it into Europe. And as soon as America entered the war, even though we were unprepared and all that, Europe knew that it was only a matter of time before Germany was defeated. Why? Because the critical decision had been made. America was coming. And they knew the industrial might. They knew the military potential. They knew that help is coming. Fresh legs are coming. And they knew at that point the struggle still had to be made, but there was that point where they knew it was done. The transition has taken place. The winter is here. The climax of summer is over. The winter's here. It'll take a little while to shake it out and get things into control of the Gen Xers. We don't give up power easy. The boomers don't. But it's going. And so we're there. And so winter's upon us. And it's important. Let me say again to you, if I draw this circle, and if I put the X's at the 12, 3, and 6 and 9 point, and if we call this winter instead of just the point there, and then this spring, it might go just a little easier for you to see. Summer would be this, and then fall over here. It's a little better of a graph to me. Springtime is an upbeat time. Things are going to grow. Things are going to come up. They call it a high. It's an outward. What you're going to do in spring is they're going to take the decisions that are made back here in this decisive crisis, and they're going to see them planted in the culture. The old stuff has been uprooted. now the new culture is going to come on. So the culture is going to seek to be conformed and stable. That's the Ozzie and Harriet generation, as it's called. That's Eisenhower. If you look on the thing, you see where it is. It's, where is it? 1946 to 64 in there. And you recall that, what that was like, and that's, you say, well, okay, well, that's a very typical spring. If you have a war in here, well, it's nobody's got any interest in it. The Korean War. You don't get any. I mean, you just came off of World War II. Don't you think MacArthur knew how to win? But who wants to win? Let's quit. We got other things to do. And so the whole passion of the nation. And what you have in here, and this is important, is you have strengthening institutions. Government institutions become stronger. Civic power becomes strong. And individual rights and individual liberties and individual issues become not so much a deal. Let's get this new growth going, and let's build, and let's have this new order, and everything looks bright in the spring. Then you get to the summer, and this is an era of passion. Boy, I tell you. Look at the dates on the summer. Would be 64, what is it, to 82? 64 to 82? 84 on there? All right. Right, rhythm and revolution. Us boomers, we went to college. You remember the summer of 69? How many remember that? You know what that is? What do you remember about the summer of 69? Cubs. Well, if you're a boomer, you remember Woodstock. If you're a silent, you remember Chappaquiddick. If you're a GI, you remember the Apollo moonshot. Summer 69, that was a big deal. People say, later on, to take Chappaquiddick, Ted Kennedy, Mary Jo Kopechne, off the bridge, runs away, does all that stuff, gets a record seal, 50 years. You know how he could get away with that? It's summertime. That was over here in the fall. That'd have hung him out to dry. In fact, he tried to run for president, and you know what they said? You remember the bumper stickers? Wanted for president or murder. But that was in the fall. In the summer, it don't really matter. See the difference in the mood in that? That's just one illustration, but that's something that you got to consider. How come you can get away with it here and you can't get away with it over there? You say, well, he's just connected. Please. No, there's more to it than that. He's all that, but hey, folks, there's people over here, all that. It's still got reamed. How come? The mood of the country, the mood of the nation, the mood of the cohort group that's in control during that period. Okay? So, anyway, the fall over here is a downcast. Fall's going to go, that's 84? What's on the thing there? 84 to about 201? Yeah. And this is it's going down. In here, the individual gets strong, and the institutions get weak. You feel like you remember 10 years ago, a guy wrote a book, Robert Bork, I think it was, wrote a book, and the first line says, America seems to be unraveling. Remember that? And that's the way you felt, wasn't it? No, you don't remember. But that's the way people felt. That's where these guys got the term for the fall, unraveling, was out of his book. Why? This is the culture war era. If you look back at the last fall, 08 to 23, World War I and what? Prohibition. What was that? Culture war. The feminist movement, Susan B. Anthony, and all those kind of women's suffrage, the culture war, the Industrial Revolution, the child labor laws, all that stuff. As much as you think that the stuff has been fought the last 20 years, it was fought with bigger vigor then. In fact, the Prohibition era there, if you go back to the one before that, in 1844 to 60, that was the period in which the per capita consumption of alcohol in America reached its zenith. Substance abuse, you think it's bad today? It was worse then per capita than it is today. We've got crack, they had laudanum. It was worse then per capita than it is in America today. It has been the last. You've had culture wars, you've had the summers are unraveling. And then you come to winter. Now, the winter time, this is a decisive era. This is when decisions, as I said before, are made. This is what they call the civic era. This is the era when decisions are made and the upheaval comes, the old is supplanted. In this era, you have a decrease in crime. It's interesting. You have a decrease in crime. I'll just read some of the characteristics. There's a widening gender distinction. You have more artistic license is minimalized. Personal violence and substance abuse reaches its lowest level in the cycle. A falling immigration. You have economic stability returns. Wars. Wars around over here are just nuisances, but a war fought in here, let's get her done. Every war fought in this cycle, every cycle doesn't have a war, but every one that has a war is decisively concluded. America is a juvenile on the stage of human history as a nation. We're still in the youth status. We still like to fight at the drop of a hat. America was born out of war. It's been at war ever since and will be for some time as a juvenile. But the ones we fight there, I mean, the War of 1812, who knows about Spanish-American War, no big deal, Grenada, I mean, you know. But World War II, the Civil War, the Revolutionary War, the War of the Roses, and now I'm talking about things you think's a movie, I know, but those wars made a difference to the whole planet. They're all wintertime. So the wintertime is a very decisive thing. There are four characteristics that Strauss and Howe give of the wintertime that I want you to notice. By the way, there's always a spark and a catalyst, and then there's a climax. I said the climax to the last one was December 7th, 1941. Took a little while to finish it, but everybody knew what was going to happen after that. The spark down here, 9/11. The catalyst, last fall, the economic thing. In 29, it was an economic crash, big deal, like we have now. You could see you could see that Black Thursday coming, October 29th, 1929. They could see it coming. Economy is good, they could know it. But what they couldn't foresee was the public reaction to it, which was so devastating. The winter before that was the election of Abraham Lincoln. They'd had different things, you know, Harper's Ferry and John Brown, all that stuff. They'd had all the Kansas things and all. They were managing the moral contentions. They were managing the cultural wars. They had tremendous culture war, racial strife, economic strife, all the things going on, cultural things. They were managing them managing them. But the thing that broke the camel's back was an election. And when they elected Abraham Lincoln, that was sort of like a vote to the southern states to secede. And that even in itself wasn't foregone before the election, but afterwards before that, in the Revolutionary War, it was the Boston Tea Party. You just had a tea party, people trying to pick up. We still remember that. You say, how in the world could throwing some tea in the ocean? But there'd been all these things that had happened, little sparks, with Parliament and England and us. And frankly, England had been trying to compromise until, they invade and have armed revolt. They attack and all that kind of stuff. And then finally, we've had enough. And it's a tea party. So you can have, it doesn't have to be big, but for us it's been a big thing. Big economic stuff. And so winter's here. There's some things you need to think about. In every winter there has been, a sweeping political realignment. The end of split government and the centralization of power. Now, you see that right now. You might not like it, but it's there. Now, you can affect it to some extent, but it's coming. Every winter's had that. Now, if I was in politics, that would mean something to me. I'd figure out what to do about that. I'm not, so I'm going to move on. Number 2, the economy is fundamentally changed. There'll be less niche marketing, more unionization, more consolidation, more savings. You'll move from a debt greed to a save, invest mentality. From the summer to the winter. You say, I'm not seeing it yet. Well, you're not very far in. You're still trying to get off what's back. That's what's going to... There'll be a fundamental change in the economy. Every winter has seen a fundamental change. Now, you guys are worrying about capitalism and socialism because you're looking at it on a linear. And if you're going to look at it linear, you're not going to see the turn coming, and you're going to wind up standing out in the parking lot out there with your shoes on and your socks gone, rather than to say you lost your pants. Number 3, a rise in public confidence and personal sacrifice. What happens in the wintertime is that all the problems get reduced down to one big issue that has to be settled. Right now you see all these things, and you say, which one? It comes down to one big thing, and we got to solve it. And you begin to develop these standardized procedures to solve these things. Every winter's had that. Now, what the issue is and how you solve it can be good or bad, but that's going to come. One that's interesting is the fourth one, and that's good and evil become more sharply identifiable. There's a desecularization. They predict that birth, marriage, and death will be pulled back from a lot of the secularization that's there. You look at it and you say, can't be. I remind you, every 20 years you couldn't tell what's going to happen. And often the opposites happen. So a lot of the things that are disintegrated in the... You remember when 9/11 happened, instantly, what was the first thing people thought about? Their families. Rescuing the people. The first responders became heroes. Remember that? Why? Because they give themselves to go... They go up the tower when everybody else is coming down the tower. And all of a sudden, in every quarter where previously if people didn't think about them, or if they did, they went boo, it was important. Parents and kids that were mad wouldn't talk to each other, calling up, "Where are you?" Why? Because there's something more fundamental than the argument we're having at the moment. What happens when that happened is that people went back to what really makes life life. They went back to those institutions in Genesis chapter 1 to 9. They went back to family, marriage, personal responsibility, being your brother's keeper kind of thing, that are kind of the basic bedrocks. So what happens in the wintertime is all this stuff that's been flying around in the summer kind of goes away. And the things that are going to be basic values for you. Now, this is a public crisis. The private crisis took place over here. Every great awakening in American history took place in that summertime. This is a spiritual awakening. But this will be a civic awakening, where we need to, and the difficulty that we face as America is that the last Great Awakening, the fourth one, that took place in the 60s, was the first Great Awakening in America that wasn't Bible-based. Every other Great American Awakening, going back to the Puritans, was at least based in some scriptural principle. The first Great Awakening with Jonathan Edwards, the second with Finney, the third one with Moody and so forth, and then the fourth one was with Dr. Spock and Timothy Leary. And it was really a New Age awakening. So the value systems that this generation comes around here to make these decisions with isn't inherently Bible-based as it had been in the past. Now, that doesn't guarantee that they make good decisions here, because in the last one, the two ago in the Civil War, they didn't make good decisions. They made some bad ones. But in all the other ones, they came out okay. But even when they made bad ones, they came out over here in the spring not quite as bad as they could have. But where the challenge just for you folks, when you start thinking about springtime, some of you guys are young enough you're going to need to think about springtime, is that what comes out of here had this as a basis, is thinking and here. So here they are. Here you are here, and by the way, here's youth, young adult, midlife, elders. In the wintertime, if you look at this chart on the back, you see the little box at the bottom, crisis era. I put that there so that you could see this is the wintertime. Every wintertime has the same group of generations. You see the names of the generations above up there and so forth. That's the names that are given to these different groups of people all through the cycles of history. But you'll notice in the right-hand column where we are, the idealist, the reaction, the boomers are idealists, the Gen X are reactive, the millennials are civic, and the homeland are babies. The homeland babies, I'd call those globalists, are the adaptive. You notice across to the left, every one of them are all the same. The Civil War one messed up, but because it didn't produce it lost one in there. But you see how they go across there? That galaxy it's in the wintertime that the national cycle matches the cycle of your life. In other words, in the wintertime, it's the elders that are the boomers that are in eldership. It's the Gen Xers that are midlifers. It's the 21 to 40-year-olds that are here. Each one of these matches. If you look at the one to the left, they don't work out that way. That's what makes this the most powerful. In the summertime, the people that are in it shifts back one. So that might not be clear to you, but the point is that's why this cycle is so powerful, is because your whole life, the individual's life, matches this. So everything is kind of synced together. And that allows wintertime to be a very, very powerful time for you. The boomers' personal life season and cycle is going to fit where we are with the nation. And what that means is that the boomers are going to be basically, for the decisive beginning of it, in control. The key to the wintertime is who's really in the power position, because it allows them and their cohorts to make the basic decisions about what goes on. There's a basic assumption that people make that the GI generation, Brokaw wrote a book. Why you'd give it a name because of him, I don't know, but they call him the greatest generation. The hero generation is what Strauss and them call them. The one characteristic of the hero generation is they do heroic things. They're very civic. They're the civic people that put order in society. They fought World War II. They came home and built a great America. But the one characteristic of every hero generation is that they take all of the money and aim it at them. They take the generations behind them's money. It was for that hero generation, I mentioned a while ago, that the child labor laws were passed to protect them. The government's taking care of these dudes their whole life. They go off to war. The idealists send people to war. The heroes are the ones that fight it. That's always where that works too. That's why these people send them to war. These people fight it. That's why the war is always decisively won, because they're going to get the job done. They fight wars with moral passion, and these guys are, let's go get them. And it makes that's why one of the reasons it's decisively done. If this generation here, if this group here is in control here in that season, they don't make that kind of decision. They don't let's fight with moral passion. They're more reticent to, we don't want to be that moral excess that our parents was. So when they're in control, they're not so ready to, maybe we should, and you wind up with a Vietnam or Spanish-American War. The War of 1812, now that settled a lot of things, didn't it? Well, no, it really didn't. The two most important battles in American history with regard to the expansion west was the Battle of New Orleans and the Alamo. Do you know that? No. Well, they were. And because that stopped it stopped two things. One, it protected the westward movement, and it stopped the Mexican encroachment. Do you understand that our western border to the south has only been secure for a little over 150 years? We are not an old nation. By the way, immigration. Everybody's worried about immigration. Immigration in the winter recedes. That's going to be a problem. Here's the thing I saw in the paper down in Tennessee just the other day. Headed toward extinction, world population rather than overpopulation is the troublesome trend that should concern the entire planet. Population, the whole globe is going down. It's going to go down in America. It is going down in America. We're going to need people to immigrate to provide a workforce. And in the middle of this century, countries are going to begin to compete for immigration. And while you're beating your head against the summertime issue of illegal immigration, your culture is changing into a place where it's going to need immigration. It's an interesting thing, how immigration works with these cycles. And because, well, anyway, we don't have time to get into all that. My point to you is that wintertime is going to be a lot different. And we're going into the winter. When the G.I. Joes came home, the hero generation came home, the civic generation came home, everyone in history shifted the money from everyone else to them. They came home and they decided, well, we need a GI Bill, so they gave themselves a GI Bill. They gave themselves housing loans and bills and things that made it possible. They gave them, the government gave them jobs. They as adults, they were educated, raised. In the midlife, they got the tax cuts and prosperity as elders. Why? You know, if you were born before 1938, you can retire when you're 65. If you weren't, you can't. Did you know that? Why not? Well, you can't retire till you're 67. Why? We got to save Social Security. For who? Not for you. I'm not mad at them. I'm just saying when you think about what goes on in these things, you begin to see some of these generations have reputations that maybe, well, you've got a health care system for the elderly today. I'm mad about it. I'm glad you take care of them. You think it's going to be there for somebody, well, maybe I'll get it, but you think you guys that are 30 are going to get it? You already know you aren't, don't you? Why? Because it can't happen. So what happens when it gets up here? People up here are going to say, hey, that don't work. And they'll change it. Why? Because you have to change it. And when you come into the spring, it'll be different. But the dudes that set it up to take care of themselves, where they're going to be? Well, they aren't on the chart anymore because they're in the grave. And somebody else comes along, takes up their duty. So you get all these kind of things going on in this, and you say, wow, man, what? Listen, can I say something to you? And I know, hey, people say, wait a minute, Brother Rick, now they fought, they won the war. I understand. Bless their hearts. I love them. My dad was one of them. 1.5% of the G.I. Joe generation went to war. 97% of them were not even injured. In the Civil War, 15% of the populace went to war. It's 8 times as many people. Of the 3 million people that went to war in the Civil War, 497,000, almost 500,000 of them were killed. That's a bigger, my point is, it's a bigger percentage. I'm glad they won the war, but you've got to be realistic about what the sacrifice was. The characteristic of that generation is always, in every cycle, that they do that. So am I mad at them because they do it? No, I just recognize that they do it, and I know it's a characteristic of what's happening. What do you do when you get to winter? We're in the winter. Your message doesn't change, okay? Your ministry doesn't change, okay? Your motivation doesn't change. You with me? The context, the season, the stage changes, but not the other. And can I tell you, don't give up on America? If I could tell you one thing, I'd say don't give up on the United States. Geopolitically, there is not another nation on the planet with our power. Has nothing to do with our economy, has nothing to do with our political structure. It'll always be that way because of the geopolitics, the geography. We're the only nation on the earth that has 2 borders, one on each great ocean. There's not another nation on the planet that has that. And access to the sea means that we control the oceans. We always will, as long as we're desirous of it. And the one who controls the sea lanes controls all of global commerce. You see the pirates down in Somalia. The Marine Corps, from the halls of Montezuma to the shores of, where's that? North Africa. Why were the Marines in North Africa? Fighting Muslim pirates. Thank you, Ben. That's why we got a Navy. It's interesting, isn't it? You ought to read a little bit about where those pirates down there come from, by the way. After you read a little bit about who they really are, you might not think they're all the bad guys. But you get all your information off of Fox News and CNN and MSNBC and ABC and CBS. And all you know about it is that. And you believe all that. I'm suggesting to you that you come unhooked of all that. We're going to emerge over here. The question for us is not the function. We know the message, we know the ministry, we know the motivation, we know what we ought to be doing. The question is only going to be the form that we're in. I'm going to make some suggestions to you after lunch about how you ought to think about that. But guys, you can't look back to summer and say, we want to do that here. The greatest era for the grace message was right there the last time. That's the O'Hare era. They made at least one fundamental mistake. I'll talk to you after lunch about it. That caused them not to successfully pass the message and the baton along into the springtime. And by the end of the springtime, what had been something powerful had fallen into total disarray and been replaced. Not with something better, but by something weaker. Every winter doesn't end good. But this was an exciting time for the grace message. This church right here was a powerhouse back in that ministry. When I came here in 1979, there were 60 people left of a church that was over 1,000, 1,400 people. And so how did that come about? They made one critical mistake that you want to be prepared not to make in wintertime. But this is an exciting time. When we emerge out of it, its form follows function. Activity follows life. You're going to have to be willing to let go of the forms, but never let go of the function. But for right now, welcome to winter. Don't let it escape your vision that we're in the winter. I would encourage you to understand what the winter is going to be like. It's a time of strengthening institutions, consolidations, decisions in a secular upheaval, when old values are jettisoned, old regimes are jettisoned, replaced by new ones. But don't think that that's where you are. Understand that we're we're in the world, but we're not of that. We're to be an in season out, we're to be the same. Our ministry, our message, our motivation is to provide that little outpost of heaven in a world that's headed toward the pit. And the salvation and the answer isn't in that stuff. That's how the world's working. So we need to know where we are and how to relate to them so as not to be seduced into thinking that's what reality is. And my wife just walked through here twice, so I think lunch must be ready. And if your stomach feels like mine does, you're probably ready. Could somebody just ask? If I tell you what we're going to do, I'll probably be wrong, but I'll tell you anyway. We're going to go lunch. The food, I think, is going to be in the front. We'll go down. Can she stick her head out? Okay, down here, right? The food is down here. We'll go down and get it. We have the tables in the back. I don't know that there are tables